Sup you beautiful people, hope you've had a fantastic day. Welcome back to another new episode of What If Naruto Was the Son of Kaguya Otsutsuki. If you guys enjoy this what if, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel after watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So now let's start this video. Standing a good distance away from the walls of Konoha, out of sight of the gate guards that he knew would be posted outside, Naruto was reminded of just how little time affected him compared to the rest of the world. Mountains would rise and fall, lakes would expand and dry up, people would be born and die, and in all that time, he would remain the same, unchanging. This is something that he had accepted long ago, yet at the same time, he hadn't gotten over it. How could one truly move past the fact that they would be the ones to bury their children, or their children's children? Naruto had learned that he would never be able to move past this, that it would always haunt him, but he had learned to simply accept it. What else could he do? Dwell on it until it consumed him. As he looked at the walls that had protected Konoha for over 50 years, Naruto couldn't help but wonder if he would have to possibly bury his son twice. Should this Minato Namikaze truly be his son, how long would he have been with him before Minato died? A shinobi life was dangerous, and considering that he heard that this Minato was the Kage of Konoha, how long before he misjudged a punch, didn't leap far enough, slipped on rock? Naruto shook his head. He couldn't think like that, not when there was the possibility of his son still being alive. Such morbid thoughts should wait for a different time. Beginning the slow trek that would be typical of his current disguise, Naruto moved forward towards the open gates. As he walked, Naruto had to admit that the clothes he was wearing were more comfortable than he had first thought. His usual black, loose-fitting pants were absent. In their place were a pair of similar-looking brown pants made of cotton. Where he would usually wear the Magatama kimono that the Yoso Sennin was known for, Naruto instead wore a brown haori with an undershirt of a similar color. All in all, it was quite plain to look at, the brown color only broken up by the parts of Naruto that were visible from the clothes openings. It made him look plain, unassuming. The perfect way to look, tying in well with the genjutsu that he covered his face and hair with, a genjutsu that made him look older than he actually was. His hair was black with gray roots showing instead of its usual pure white. Wrinkles adorned his usually flawless skin, while his pure white eyes were a startling green. The figure that was walking towards Konoha looked almost completely different from the one that had defended Uzushiagakure several years ago. As he moved to the gates, Naruto had to momentarily pause for a moment, wondering if he wasn't the only one who stopped aging. Before him were the exact same gate guards that he had seen when he first returned to Konoha to train Tsunade and her little friends. But it was as he stared at them that Naruto began to notice several differences between the two people before him and the ones that had guarded the gate several years ago. The differences in clothing, along with several other features, told Naruto that they were most likely the sons of the two that had met him originally. These two were also taking their jobs much more seriously than the other two had been. Both were alert and constantly scanning the area for any sudden movement. Though whether this was because the Third Shinobi War, as the people were calling it, had just finished, or if they actually took their duties seriously remained to be seen. As he approached the gates, he noticed the two shinobi share a look as he approached, and noticed the cautious looks on their faces. When it came to shinobi, one was never too old to be a threat. It made sense that these two would be weary of him even though he looked well past his prime. The look quickly ended, and the shinobi on his left, the one who wore his forehead protector like a bandana, approached the disguised Naruto. The ageless man noted that the shinobi kept a hand over the kunai pouch on his right leg. "Greetings, citizen, how may Konoha help you today?" The man tried to keep his voice bright and cheerful, but Naruto could sense the suspicion that the man had for him, which Naruto couldn't fault. Even when he constantly suppressed himself as much as he could, Naruto just seemed to emit an aura that spoke of strength. Many times it wasn't noticeable, but if one was trained extensively in the chakra arts, they were able to sense it. The aura wasn't very strong, hence why people like Tobirama or Hashirama wouldn't have reacted to it. But to those who were only just able to sense it, like he could guess the two before him could, it would have been a bit intimidating. "Hello," Naruto greeted with a smile. "My name is Naruto. I am a humble traveler here to visit Konoha. I do not mean you, nor your beautiful village, any harm." Naruto had pondered on his way to the village hidden in the leaf if he should make up a reason for going to the village, or simply tell them that the real reason, that he had heard his son was alive when he had previously thought him dead. Naruto had eventually decided that it would be easier and more believable if he made up a reason. less of a chance of him getting labeled as insane and thrown in a cell. For a moment, Naruto had thought he had laid on the compliments a bit too thickly. The shinobi narrowed his eyes and scrutinized Naruto, looking him up and down. Acting was never something that Naruto took a particular shine to. He could spot a lie, tell a lie, but acting was out of his league. For what seemed like an eternity, the shinobi stared at Naruto before holding his hand out. "Papers?" he asked, before Naruto handed over the appropriate papers that he had created in a town several kilometers away, when he realized he would need them to prove he was who he said he was. It took a bit of convincing to get the owner of the shop to make him the papers he required without having them beforehand. The shinobi looked over the papers, his eyes roaming over the pages, checking for any inconsistency that might be shown, while keeping half an eye on Naruto. "Very well, Naruto-san," the man said, handing the papers back over to the elderly-looking man. "Your papers seem to be correct. I hope you have a good time in Konoha." The shinobi then stepped back and gestured towards the village. "Enjoy your stay." "Thank you," Naruto said before he walked past both shinobi and into the village, aware of the guard's eyes boring into his back as he moved further into Konoha. Ignoring the lingering gazes that he could feel, Naruto focused on the village, trying to spot the differences that would have cropped up in the years since he last visited. Yet apart from many of the buildings being new, some having been touched up with a coat of paint, or simply being more modern, nothing had truly changed. Sure, the fashion had progressed forward, less people wearing kimonos and instead changing to more functional clothing, and there was a subtle hum of electricity as it powered the lights and electronics inside the homes of the citizens and ninja of the village. But this was no different to any other village that Naruto had been to. The only thing that Naruto could really spot that hadn't been there before, as he walked through the village, was a new face on the Hokage monument, sitting to the right of Sarutobi Hiruzen. This could only be Namikaze Minato, his potential son. Naruto stopped in the middle of the street and stared hard at the sculpted head of his possible child, trying to locate any similarities between himself and Minami and the face etched into the mountainside. After a few moments of staring, his lips curled into a soft smile, almost unnoticeable unless one looked hard enough. Minato had Minami's face, her soft features, that much he could say if the stone carving was anything like the real thing. Naruto shook his head for a moment, snapping himself out of the momentary gaze and turning towards the Hokage Tower, where he knew Minato would be. After looking at the stone bust, Naruto was now almost positive that Minato was his son, unless whoever designed the statue got Minato's features completely wrong. Now, all he had to do was to confirm his theories, and the only way he could do that was to take a good look at the Yondaime Hokage. Changing his direction and moving closer towards the village center, Naruto moved with a speed that almost made him want to cry. It was far too slow for his liking. He wanted to hurry up and find out if his son was alive. Yet, he knew he would have to go at this pace if he wanted to keep his cover, especially with the 8 ninja that were hiding on the rooftops observing his every movement. The journey to the Hokage Tower took noticeably longer than Naruto remembered, whether because of his impatience to get there or the knowledge that there were several ninja watching him. The length of the trek seemed stretch. But Naruto persevered through the annoying long length of time that it took him to arrive at the tower, and was now standing in front of the building, his cover still intact. Though the ninja that were still watching him were beginning to piss him off, as far as he knew he hadn't done anything that warranted suspicion, nor had he done anything that would have blown his cover, yet they still continued to follow him. He had even walked over to some random stand and bought some random antique, like someone his age would, yet they still continued to follow him, staying just out of his line of sight, yet nowhere near out of range. His sharp hearing couldn't make out any whispering, but he knew that ninja were supposed to be invisible. They probably had some kind of sign language so that they wouldn't have to use their mouths and possibly give away their position. Not that it really mattered with him. Naruto put that out of his mind and moved inside the tower, keeping his senses on alert. These ninjas suspect something about him. They wouldn't be watching him otherwise, so they might take him walking into somewhere important like the Hokage Tower as a reason to upgrade his status from suspect to threat. This rise in threat level would probably involve the authorization to use force if he did something they didn't like. And Naruto was pretty sure that a threat walking to the building that their leader resided in classified as something they didn't like. But as he walked into the building, none of the ninja watching him moved. In fact, some of them began to move away. Naruto's momentary confusion was quickly erased when several other presences made themselves known to his sense. So the ones watching him previously were for a target outside, while these ones were either limited to the Hokage Tower or the Hokage's personal guard. Though in Naruto's opinion, it seemed kind of redundant to have the Hokage, or any Kage for that matter, guarded when they were generally the strongest person in the village. If someone was strong enough to kill a Kage, it was highly unlikely that his guards would be able to do anything about it. Moving to the stairs, Naruto then began to trek upwards, his tails following him. As he passed several open doorways on his way to next flight of stairs to the next level in the tower, Naruto noticed that almost all of the occupants in the rooms snapped their heads from their desks, where they were writing reports of some kind, to look at him. Their eyes would almost immediately narrow by the most minuscule amount. That was all Naruto needed to see before he could come to his own conclusions about the Hokage Tower. The tower, while at first glance looked like it had 2 layers of defense, the guards and seals that lined the walls of the building actually had 3. The people working in the offices were a defense in themselves. All of them were trained ninja, most likely high-ranking ninja if they were doing paperwork, and therefore highly skilled. Quite ingenious if Naruto said so himself. Not many people would take the office workers into account if they tried to attack this tower, and it would then lead the conclusion of almost any kind of assault into failure. Continuing to make his way up the flights of stairs of the Hokage Tower, Naruto eventually found himself outside a place that he had been to only a handful of times before, the Hokage's office. The secretary was nowhere to be seen, something that made Naruto raise an eyebrow, before he looked towards the door that would let him into the office of the leader of Konoha. At least without the secretary being here, he wouldn't have to explain why he should be let in without an appointment. Moving forward, Naruto was just about to place his hand on the door handle when he froze, not because of some sort of attack, but because of a thought. It was something that made Naruto question if he should walk through that door. Would Minato want him? Throughout the years, Naruto had dreamed of the moment when he was reunited with his children and wife. He had imagined Minato crying out with joy, himself doing the same, and his son leaping into his arms where he would hold him tightly. He had imagined Konan running towards him on her 2 tiny legs where he would pick her up and spin her around before holding her close. He had imagined Minami and himself running into each other's arms where they would hold each other and never let go. Yet, now as he stood just a few steps away from making a part of that dream a reality, his hopes were shattered by a single fact. Minato wasn't a little boy anymore. He was a grown man, he didn't need a father, he didn't need any parents. His son was an adult, and a shinobi no less. Would his father barging back into his life really be miracle or a curse? Naruto knew that if he walked through that door that he wouldn't be able to leave, he wouldn't be able to simply walk away from his son, grown or not. He would want to be part of his life, he would want to know about him, share in his experiences. The thoughts conflicted in his mind, his heart yearning for his hand to reach out to grab the handle and turn, while his mind kept wondering if he was truly needed. But in the end, Naruto's choice was made for him. "Would you like to come in now?" came a voice from the other side of the door. "The door is unlocked." Naruto tensed for a moment when he heard the voice before he steeled his nerves and slowly reached for the handle, and then turned it. The door seemed to take years to swing open, slowly revealing the room to Naruto, the plank of wood seemingly swinging in slow motion. As soon as the door had opened far enough, Naruto's eyes zeroed in on the person sitting behind the desk, and his breath hitched in his throat. The most noticeable feature about the man sitting behind the desk was his blonde hair. It was spiky with 2 bangs that came down the side of his face, reaching his jaw. His eyes were a blue that Naruto had only seen recently on one other person. A blue headband was wrapped around his forehead with a metal plate with the Konohagakure emblem engraved on the surface. His outfit consisted of a blue Konoha uniform, along with 2 bands on either sleeve, and a green flak jacket under a white haori, which was decorated with a flame design along the edges, was his outfit. "Can I help you, civilian-san?" he said with a smile. A smile that reminded Naruto so much of his second wife. There was no doubt in Naruto's mind anymore, this was his son. "You look so much like your Ka-san," Naruto murmured, almost absent-mindedly as he gazed at his son. A small smile made it to his face while he forced back the tears that threatened to escape. However, Minato didn't appear to like being compared to his mother. As his face hardened, his eyes became cold and voice gaining a frigid tone. "So, that's why you're here." Naruto was slightly taken back by the sudden change in attitude of the man before him, where before he had been welcoming and warm, he was now harsher than the deserts of Suna. Naruto was about to open his mouth to ask what was wrong when Minato snapped his fingers. resulting in two of ninja that had followed him dropping down and grabbing an arm each, keeping him in place. The disguised man had to restrain himself from using his strength flick off the dead weight, settling for struggling like a weak civilian would do. Naruto noticed that his captors were wearing animal masks and a different set of armor and clothing to any other ninja that he had come across. He idly wondered if this was that secret unit that Tobirama tried to put together. Turning back to his son, who was now walking towards him with a scowl on his face and surprising amount of anger for someone who had been quite happy moments ago, Naruto opened his mouth. "What are you doing, Minato?" Evidently, that was the wrong thing to say as the anger in Minato's eyes increased. "You have not earned the right to call me that, civilian-san," Minato told him with anger, "and unless you tell me why you are here, right now, I will have you thrown into one of the many free jail cells that we have available in the torture and interrogation department." Naruto paused halfway through saying his son's name when he saw his anger rising again. He gave a small sigh before trying again. "Hokage-sama, I don't know how to properly say this, but..." Naruto paused again before deciding to spit it out. "You're my son." The reaction that Naruto got wasn't something he expected. There was no surprise, no shock, no happiness, and no joy. Even the anger that Minato seemed to have before appeared to have been drained from his system, leaving only a cold indifference. A part of Naruto wished that the anger would come back. "So," Minato said, the cold indifference actually hurting Naruto more than the anger did. "You claim to be my Tucson." When Naruto gave a slow nod and Minato continued, "I have to admit, this is one of the cheaper scams I've come across." That knocked Naruto back. "Scam?" Naruto said in almost complete astonishment. "You think I'm lying?" Naruto couldn't hold back the hint of anger that came to his voice. Minato was his son. He wouldn't lie about something like that. "Isn't it obvious?" Minato told him as he stood up from behind his desk and moved around it to stop in front of Naruto. "We look almost nothing alike. And you come to supposedly claim me just after I have done something that the whole world has heard of." Minato let out a scoff. "I am not stupid." Naruto froze as he processed Minato's words, and his own dyed his mouth as brain presented him to its conclusion. Minato seemed to take this silence as something else. "So you finally admit that you're a liar." Minato's face twisted as his anger reared its ugly head. "People like you make me sick. You would be willing to go so low as to impersonate a man's Tucson, simply for fame and wealth. The sad part is that you're not the first to attempt something like this. Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Looking at the man that Izumo and Kotsu had marked as suspicious, Minato waited for an answer. Whatever answer Minato was expecting, however, it certainly wasn't the one that he got. "You can't remember anything, can you?" The words were soft, but Minato still heard them and stiffened as he did so. A lance of sadness jabbed at Naruto's heart as he watched his son reacted to his words, knowing that he was right. His son couldn't remember his face, his sister's, or his mother's. "You were about 5 when I lost you," Naruto continued. "You should be able to remember my face." Minato's visage then hardened again. "You have still showed me no proof of your relation to me. All you've done is taken incredibly lucky guesses." Naruto felt another lance of sadness at the anger directed at him, flinching slightly at the tone. Taking a small breath, Naruto stared into the Hokage's eyes and prayed that Minato would believe that he was his father. "Hokage-sama," Naruto said, afraid of fueling his son's rage. "In my robes' scroll, it contains a painting of our family, the last one that we had together before our family was broken." As he watched Minato's face, Naruto saw that it displayed no reaction to the claim of proof, causing him to inwardly curse those that tried to take his place in his son's life. The ones before him might have had proof, as well, making proving his own relation to Minato harder. The only other proof he could offer Minato, besides the painting, would be the story of how he was left alone in the world. With a signal to the unseen group of elite shinobi that were hiding in various places around the room, Naruto watched another revealed itself, showing off a snake mask. The shinobi moved up to Naruto's restrained position and shifted the sides of the brown haori that he was wearing, searching for the scroll. It didn't take long for them to find, hanging at his side along with several others that Naruto brought, the others holding several spare changes of clothes and other items. Taking all of them, the masked shinobi then turned his gaze to Naruto before looking back at the several scrolls in their hands, each one with a tag hanging from an end. "It's labeled," Naruto told them as the ninja then moved back over to the Hokage's desk before placing them on the surface and searching through them. Naruto noticed that Minato's gaze was locked onto the several scrolls. After a few seconds, the ninja turned back to Minato, presenting him with scroll with family portrait scribbled on a tag attached at one end. Naruto's son then took said scroll from their hands and then moved back to the desk and laid the scroll on top, before unraveling the parchment. Placing his hand on the Fuinjutsu matrix, Minato pumped chakra into the seal on the scroll. If it was some sort of attack, Minato had faith that his Hiraishin no Jutsu, Flying Thunder God technique, would be able to take himself and the scroll, along with whatever it was carrying, to a clear place before it detonated. There was a poof and a cloud of smoke appeared from the sealing scroll, obscuring whatever was taken from the scroll's contents. Naruto felt the hands holding his arms tighten ever so slightly as the cloud of smoke appeared, yet relax a second after when nothing happened. Naruto watched from his position as his son then reached into the clearing smoke and pulled out one of his most treasured possessions. The painting was something that reminded him of a much simpler time, when all he had to worry about was if his children and wife were happy. From his place between the two shinobi, Naruto was able to look over his son's shoulder and at the painting that he was holding. He could see the happy faces reflected back at him from the canvas, his son and daughter's grinning visage captured by the painter, his small, blue-haired daughter in her mother's arms, with his son standing in front of him, his own hands on his shoulders. But from his position, Naruto couldn't see his son's face and how he was taking the appearance of the painting. He could find it as a fake, he could believe it, or he could wish for more proof. Only two of those outcomes were desirable for Naruto. "Who is the girl?" Minato questioned, knocking Naruto out of his thoughts. Minato hadn't turned around and was instead focusing on the portrait in front of him. "Was she adopted?" "No," Naruto said, causing Minato to turn around, allowing his father to see the mild surprise in his eyes. "She is your sister, born a year after you." Naruto saw Minato turn back to painting. "Your Kasan said that she gained her looks from both her grandparents." "Her name is Konan," he told him. "Your Kasan's was Minami." Minato continued to stare at the painting for several more moments before placing the painting back down on the desk and turning to look at Naruto. "I'll admit, Naruto-san, my interest is piqued. None before you have produced a painting of such high quality to me as proof. None others had said that I have had a sister either," Minato said in a neutral tone. "There is only one other thing that I believe that you could present to me here that could convince me that you are indeed my Tucson. You know what that is, don't you?" Minato moved around behind his desk and sat back in his chair, looking Naruto straight in the eyes. The disguised man didn't know when, but Minato gave a signal for the shinobi on either side of him to release their hold on his arms. The Hokage then gave a small gesture to the seat on the opposite side of his desk, an indication to sit. Naruto did so, sliding into the seat and placing his hands on the desk. This wasn't something that he had hoped to tell with company still in the room. However, if it got him his son back, then he would preserve through his own discomfort. "Your Kasan and I met a few decades ago, Minato," Naruto began with a sigh. "It was several years before the Second Shinobi War, and I was merely wandering the roads. I never truly had a job. I was more like a hermit, living mostly off the land, only doing jobs in the towns that I went to for the most basic of supplies, clothes, medicines, things like that." Naruto shook his head to get himself back on track, glad to be able to move past the part of the story that required him to lie to his son. "Anyway, I was merely walking along the road near Kusa no Kuni, land of grass, when I encountered your Kasan. She was running from several bandits that had attacked her family's caravan. They had murdered the rest of her family, and his was only thanks to luck that she managed to escape. After your Kasan ran into me, I defeated using several skills that I had learned through my travels. She then followed me to the closest village," Naruto continued, "where she said that she would then find someone who would be able to take her to her home, further north. During the time we spent on the road together, I grew fond of her." A small smile managed to worm its way to Naruto's face as he retold the story. The owner of the smile didn't notice it, but Minato did. "Her face was cherry red when she asked if I would like to accompany her to her home. She looked like a tomato." Naruto released a chuckle at the memory, and surprisingly enough, Minato did as well. Naruto didn't comment but prayed that the chuckle was a good sign. "As I'm sure you can guess, I agreed and followed her home, where we eventually fell in love and had both you and Konan. Nothing made your Kasan happier than when she was holding the two of you. You were quite hyper when you were a child, quite inquisitive as well," Naruto told his son. "Minami used to pull her hair out of her head in worry when she couldn't find you after you wandered off somewhere." Naruto gave another chuckle, "A bit like me when I was younger in that regard. But I could always find you when you ran off." Naruto's smile then diminished as the tale progressed, mentally going over the events in his mind as he spoke them, remembering his failure. During the Second Shinobi War, Iwa Ninja assumed control over the town where we lived, taking several men from their homes and putting them to work. But as they began to require more forces, a forced conscription began to take place, not involving the men and women, but the children. Naruto sighed as he continued. They rounded up any child with above-average reserves for their age, sent them back to Iwa to be trained. Your Ka-san and I left almost as soon as we heard, packing what was needed, and set off for the south, towards the land of rivers. Neither of us wanted you to be taken from us, Minato. Naruto looked to his son, trying to convey his feelings through a meeting of the eyes, but Minato had his closed, whether to prevent himself from meeting Naruto's eyes or process the information he was receiving, Naruto didn't know. It was during the trip that we were separated. Naruto continued, wanting to end the story quickly, Minato's constant silence making him feel slightly uncomfortable. While we were walking, we came upon a group of ninja, discussing several matters that were covert. They heard us, Naruto said, omitting the fact that it was Minato that had alerted them. His son didn't need to know that. And moved to kill us, all of us. I told Minami to run, to get away along with you and Konan while I held off the ninja. She took you both and ran further ahead. Naruto released a breath as he moved to finish the story. I managed to subdue the ninja, but what I didn't know was that one managed to move past me while I was preoccupied. By the time I realized that one had gotten past, Naruto didn't finish his sentence. There was enough for anyone to infer what happened. Your Ka-san's body was burned beyond all recognition. All that was left to identify her with was what remained of her hair and clothing. Naruto let out another breath as he continued. This was the first time he had told this story to another being, and it was much harder than he had previously anticipated. I never found yours or Konan's bodies. I had assumed that they had been incinerated by the fire. After I gave your sister and Ka-san a burial, I went into seclusion, much like I had previously done before I met your Ka-san. Naruto looked again to Minato, finding the man looking back at him with open eyes. But when I heard rumors about a man named Minato, with blonde hair, a spark of hope came back to my heart. So I came here to see if the man that Konoha called the Yondaime Hokage was my son, hoping that I was wrong all those years ago. Naruto let another smile come to his face as he looked at the man he knew was his son. And I don't think that I've been as grateful as I am now that I did. He kept his gaze locked with that of his son, not swaying. He could sense that his son was searching him with his eyes. Searching for deceit, for half-truths, for an alternative motive, for something that would discredit his story, but Naruto knew he would find none. This seemed to go on for years, the two of them merely staring straight at each other, neither moving. The Anbu in the room shuffled uncomfortably, not truly knowing what to do. The elder of the two sitting people may have done something to their Hokage, but none of them had seen him make any suspicious movements, nor gestures, yet all of them knew that it wasn't impossible to do a genjutsu without moving. But at the same time, all of them knew that this was an important moment for their leader. This was the furthest that any person had come in convincing the blonde Kage that they were his father. Should they interfere with a possibly life-changing moment in their Kage's life, or should they let it play out? In the end, none of them got the chance to act as their leader rapidly blinked while bringing a hand up to his eye. He gave a small watery chuckle as his hand rubbed away at the eye. I believe you, Minato said finally after the several moments of silence. So I guess you really are my two-san, Minato told the man opposite him. I always did wonder what he would look like, what features I inherited from him. Naruto gave Minato a smile as some tears began to appear in the corners of pseudo-black-haired man's eyes. I bet you didn't think that you took after your Ka-san, did you? Naruto asked Minato, who gave a short shake of the head. No, I always thought of my looks coming from my two-san. Minato's hand finally pulled away from his eye as he gave his father a smile. Naruto then decided to ask for something he had wanted for a long time. So, could you give your two-san a hug? It is a way to make up for all the birthday presents you were supposed to get me, Naruto said jokingly, though Minato could sense a hint of wanting in his father's voice and was able to immediately decrypt the hidden meaning behind the words. Well, I could, but what about all of my birthdays that you missed? Minato said, returning the joke and getting up from his seat as he spoke, Naruto doing the same moments later. I'm sure I could find something to give you to make up for the many birthdays that I missed, Naruto said as he walked around the side of Minato's desk, the owner of said desk doing the same. And I'm sure that I could find nice walking stick for you, two-san, Minato said cheekily, while a small tick mark appeared on Naruto's forehead at the comment. I'm not that old, you can't make old jokes about me yet, Naruto told his son, but the denial didn't work as well as it should have when Naruto knew that if anyone in the world deserved to be called old, it would be him. Minato gave a chuckle, making Naruto give him a small smile. The two of them were standing in front of one another at the side of Minato's desk. Naruto looked at his son, his own flesh and blood. Someone he had thought he had lost years ago was now standing before him, within touching distance. A chuckle made its way out of his throat. "I've waited for this moment for so long," Naruto said as he gazed at Minato, the genjutsu still hiding his true hair and eye color. "I had thought that it was out of my reach a month ago, but here I am, standing in front of my son." "So have I too, son," Minato replied. "I had hoped when I was a child that my mother or father would come for me." Naruto winced slightly at the words, but Minato continued as if it didn't happen. "As I grew older, I began to believe less and less that my parents would come for me until eventually I simply stopped believing altogether. Like with you too, son, a month ago, I would never have thought this possible. I never imagined that I would be standing in front of my father and would have called anyone who said so crazy. But here I am, standing in front of my two-san." Naruto brought a hand up to quickly rub his eye before he turned his attention back to his son. "So, is my big, manly son going to give me a hug, or is he too old for that?" Naruto asked his son. Minato simply chuckled and opened his arms, Naruto doing the same, and for the first time in almost 2 decades, father and son were reunited. Neither half of the embracing couple noticed that Anbu in the room take up their hidden positions once more, letting the father and son have their moment. As far as Naruto was concerned, there was nothing that could spoil this moment for him. It was his dreams come true. He had his son back. It was like Kami had taken pity on him and given him back something that he had thought he had lost. A small tear made its way down the side of his face as he held his son for the first time in so long, followed by a few more. He imagined Minami smiling down at him from her position in the Jodo, Pure Lands. Naruto didn't know how long they stayed in each other's embrace, but like all good things, it had to come to an end. Minato was the one that moved to pull apart, with Naruto doing the same after much internal grumbling. Holding his father at arm's length, Minato decided that it was now his turn to tell his story. "I supposed I should tell you what happened after Kasan ran away," Minato said to his father, who gave a small nod. Both men then moved back to their former positions on either side of Minato's desk. "I supposed I should start off by saying that when you said that I couldn't remember my childhood, that wasn't entirely true," Minato explained. "The majority of my life before I came to Konoha is blur, but I sometimes get flashes of a face or a few words, but they're always gone before I can truly take in what I'm being shown." Minato cleared his throat before continuing. "Anyway, while I don't remember all of what happened, I do know enough to put the pieces together, especially with what you told me, Tucson." A small smile appeared on Minato's face. "It still feels weird to call anyone Tucson. I can't believe I get to call someone my son," Naruto agreed. "Moving on," Minato said, continuing, "while I can't remember the entire thing, I do remember flashes of what happened." A small frown made its way to Minato's visage. "It's not much, but I can remember a woman, most likely Kasan, telling me to run. I remember fire, feeling heat lick at my skin. I remember Kasan telling me to run again, but this time further away than the last time. Then all I can remember is running for my life. I don't hear any more voices after that, but I remember hitting something hard before blacking out." Minato gave a sigh, frustrated at the lack of what he could remember. "When I would then wake up, it would be in the Konoha hospital with little memory of anything before. They said that I was found knocked out near a few destroyed trees by a patrol a few kilometers from Konoha. I was then put in an orphanage where I then joined the Shinobi Academy at 6. Once I then reached the rank of Genin at 10, I was allowed to legally leave the orphanage." Minato was then cut off when Naruto spoke, disbelief in his voice. "You moved out of an orphanage when you were 10. How did you make money to survive? Why were you allowed to?" The shock at what Minato had said was as clear as day on Naruto's face, and his son could not help laugh at it a bit. "A ninja is considered a legal adult when they become a genin, and I paid for the apartment with the money I made from D-rank missions, along with some extra odd jobs that I picked up," Minato said when he spoke again. "I believe that you can guess what I did after that. I rose through the ninja ranks until I became a Hokage candidate and got the position." "Are you sure that's all?" Naruto asked with a raised eyebrow to his son, causing the blonde to give him a questioning look. "Call it a father's intuition, but I can sense that there is something that you're not telling me." Minato gave a slightly nervous laugh, his hand coming up to rub the back of his head. Oh yeah, about that, see, the The strange thing is that I may have, possible, kind of, Minato's dancing around with words was put to a halt when Naruto began to laugh quite hard. Minato's father couldn't believe it. It seemed that his son didn't get only his mother's looks. Finally getting his laughter under control, Naruto explained his actions. Your Ka-san was almost exactly the same when she asked me to go with her back to her home. She was stuttering and dancing around the point of her words, much like you are now. In fact, the only difference between the two of you would be the fact that she was also red in the face. Naruto said with a chuckle as he remembered, again, how nervous his wife could be. Sorry for the interruption, Minato, continue. Okay, well, you see, Minato stuttered a bit before taking a calming breath. Once he felt that he had himself under control, he looked his father in the eyes and finally spoke. I kinda have a girlfriend. Naruto blinked at the sudden spewing of words before taking a finger and using it to clear his ear while Minato gave a sheepish smile towards his father. I'm sorry, Naruto said after he had taken his finger out of his ear. What? Minato gave another small nervous laugh before managing to calm himself down, who knew it could be so hard to tell a parent that they had a girlfriend. I have a girlfriend, Minato managed to say after measuring every single word, making sure to pronounce each syllable carefully as to not muddle up his speech again, but also making sure to pay attention to his father's reaction to his news. Naruto blinked again at his son's confession, his brain processing what had been said yet at the same time, refusing to believe what it was being told. His son, a boy who, up until an hour or two ago, he had always pictured as a small 5-year-old child. Being told by his son that he had a girlfriend erased whatever thoughts he had that his son was that same 5-year-old boy that loved his blue shirt. His son was a grown man now, and it was in that instant that Naruto knew that he could either accept it and move forward from here as a figure in his son's life, or deny it and be restricted to watching from a distance. His choice was obvious. So, Naruto said with a smile coming to his features, you have a girlfriend, do I get to meet her? His smile then turned sly. After all, I need to make sure that she is fit to date my son. Strangely enough, Minato slightly paled at those words. I don't think that would be a good idea too, son. Minato stuttered slightly, fearing the wrath of his girlfriend. She might take offense to that. While more powerful than his girlfriend, Minato knew that when truly angered, there was nothing that could stand in her way. Naruto internally raised an eyebrow at his son's sudden stuttering, deciding to play along until he could determine why. Naruto spoke again. Okay, fine, but do I get to meet my future daughter-in-law? He teased, while Minato blushed slightly at the teasing. Anbu, Minato called after getting his face's color under control, one of the ninja with animal masks appearing less than a second after being called. Bring Kushina Uzumaki to my office. Naruto mentally raised an eyebrow at the last name of Minato's girlfriend before turning to look at the Anbu shinobi, who, instead of moving off to complete his duty, spoke. That will be unnecessary, Hokage-sama. Uzumaki-san is currently waiting outside your office. We kept her there so that she wouldn't interrupt your current business. The ninja report in a monotone voice, not revealing any sort of personal opinion on the matter. Minato paled visibly at the answer that was given to him. How long was she waiting? Naruto's son asked, already fearing the information that he would receive, while Naruto merely watched with interest at the interaction between his son and the ninja. 10 minutes, Hokage-sama, the masked ninja replied, causing Minato pale a bit more before releasing a sigh. Send her in, he said, as if resigning himself to his fate. The Anbu nodded once before vanishing back into the shadows of the room, with the door opening a second later as a person came through. Said person then immediately made their displeasure at being kept waiting known. Minato Baka, Databane, a voice yelled as the owner stormed into the room, either ignoring Naruto's presence or simply oblivious to it, and focusing on the cringing man behind the desk. Said person wore a flak jacket that Naruto had seen several ninja wearing, over a black short-sleeved shirt along with black form-fitting pants that reached her calves. A blue forehead protector was on her brow, with red hair tied up in a high ponytail along with strands framing the sides of her face. Violet eyes burned with a fire that was aimed at Minato as the owner of the orb stomped her way towards him. As she moved around the Minato's side of the desk, she reached over and slapped said man over the head with her hand. You baka idiot, she said again as Minato rubbed the back of his head. I'm your girlfriend, you don't make your girlfriend wait on you, even if you're the Hokage. I don't care if you're on and meeting the Tsuchikage to sort out peace between the nations. When you make a date with your girlfriend, you better keep it Minato Baka. The woman that Naruto could confidently say was Kushina Uzumaki, then folded her arms across her chest. So, what do you have to say for yourself? Naruto then noticed Kushina's eyes narrow dangerously, instinctively moving away from the redhead slightly as his own experiences of having that kind of gaze leveled at him came to the forefront of his mind. And you better have a good answer for ditching me on our date, or I swear that you'll envy the beating that I give Jiraiya when I'm done with you, Databane. Kushina then raised her fist in a threatening display while Minato held both hands out in front of him, trying to ward off the beating that he could feel coming. Kei Kushina-chan, don't. Minato then turned his gaze to his father. We have company, he said, pointing a finger over to his father, with his girlfriend following the finger to find the one who had held up her date. Her eyes immediately narrowed further as her gaze landed on Naruto, who found himself feeling quite small at the moment. So, Kushina spoke in deceptively calm tone as she cracked her knuckles. You're the reason that I didn't get to eat the food of the gods today. Minato's girlfriend then moved back around to the other side of the desk and bent over so that she and Naruto were eye level, a creepy smile appearing on her face. Well, I hope you're ready for a knuckle sandwich, her smile then turning into a grin that would have petrified a lesser being. Cause I got plenty, Databane. Kushina then raised her hand and prepared to deliver a blow to Naruto, only for Minato to interject, waving his arms around in order to get his girlfriend to stop. Kushina, don't, he yelled, getting her fist to stop several centimeters over its rightful target. Why not? The redhead gritted out through her teeth, her eyes locked on the target of her ire. He interrupted a date that you have promised me for weeks, Databane. Give me one reason why I shouldn't clobber this old fart. Minato winced slightly at Kushina's rather crude terminology. Because that old fart, as you put it, as I discovered today, is my Tucson. The silence was deafening as both Minato and Naruto watched Kushina process the new information that had been given to her, before her eyes suddenly widened as it all clicked into place. With a nervous chuckle, Kushina lowered the fist that she had held over Naruto, her whole demeanor changing as she did so. Ah, sorry about that, Namikaze-sama, she said sheepishly. I didn't know that you were spending time with your son, I'll just leave. As she finished, she turned to walk towards the door, only for a hand to snatch at her wrist. Turning around to see who had grabbed her, thinking that it might have been Minato, she was surprised to see that it was her boyfriend's father who was attacked to the hand. It's okay, the dark-haired male said, amusement twinkling in his eyes. I would like to see just who had caught my son's attention. Kushina turned back towards the other two occupants in the room, while Naruto released his hand from her wrist, standing up as he did so. Minato then moved around his desk. Tucson, this is Kushina Uzumaki, my girlfriend. Kushina-chan, this is my Tucson, Naruto. The Hokage said, introducing the two to each other, both adults shaking the other's hand in greeting. So, Minato said after the greetings were exchanged, how about we get something to eat? Naruto had seen many things throughout his life, many disgusting and disturbing, some rage-inducing and angering, others were some of the most pleasant things that he had been allowed to lay eyes on. Yet he didn't know how to classify what he was currently looking at. Currently seated on a stool in front of a small ramen shop, Minato sitting between himself and Kushina, Naruto watched as his son's girlfriend inhaled the shop's food, downing a large bowl of the broth within a minute. Naruto felt like he should be disgusted, but the simple fact that she was on her sixth bowl without having thrown up was amazing. Where was she putting this stuff? Naruto was sure that she had eaten more than a regular stomach could hold. Stranger still, Minato was simply eating normally. He hadn't looked over or spoke a word to his girlfriend since they had arrived. Not that it looked like she would notice or respond based on how focused she was in shoving as much ramen as she could down her throat. Turning back to his own bowl of miso ramen before him, Naruto pushed it away. Whatever appetite he had was gone after witnessing the eating ritual of Kushina Uzumaki when it concerned the food of the gods, as she put it. Hearing a chuckle, he looked up to see a roughly 30-year-old man dressed in white kimono and chef's hat, most likely one of the employees. Don't worry, it happens to everyone when they first see her eat, the cook explained. You'll eventually build up a resistance to it. Only the true iron stomachers can watch her eat for the first time. Tucci, the man then introduced, owner of Ramen Ikaraku. Naruto, said man replied, has Kushina always eaten like that? No, but she hasn't eaten ramen for a while. This is the result of ramen withdrawal, as Kushina has named it. Basically, she's making up for all the ramen she missed. Tucci told Minato's father, I know that she's always liked ramen, but I think that she only liked ramen this much after she was forced to come here about 10 years ago. That's the power of my ramen, the cook said with a grin. What do you mean forced to come here? Naruto inquired. Tucci immediately lost his smile at those words. I thought that the exchange program between Konoha and Uzushiagakure was voluntary. Tucci looked to Kushina, who was still scoffing down ramen by the bowl, and then to Minato, who was watching them out of the corner of his eye. Minato gave a nod to Tucci before returning his focus to his food. I can't tell you the whole story, Tucci explained when he turned back to Naruto, his voice significantly lower than before, because not only do I not know it, but it isn't my story to tell, it's Kushina's. All I know for certain is that Kushina was made to come here after an argument with her family, which is still in Uzushiagakure. It has put a severe strain between herself and her family. She won't speak of her parents to anyone bar close friends, and even then it isn't much. Tucci let out a sigh before continuing. Hopefully with the war over she'll be able to reconcile with her parents, but I think it will take a long time before she even thinks about it. Naruto gave the ramen chef a nod of thanks before Tucci went to make another bowl of ramen for Kushina. The red-headed Uzumaki had already nearly finishing her 7th bowl. Naruto then lost himself in the information that Tucci had given him. The Uzumaki clan were quite family-orientated, so for them to forcefully send one of their own somewhere would mean that it would take them out of danger somehow or would be in their best interests. But obviously Kushina didn't think that it was. Still, he didn't have enough knowledge to draw up a possible theory about what happened, but made a note to talk about it to Kushina when she was more comfortable around him. Naruto looked over to notice that Kushina had finished what appeared to be her last bowl of ramen, placing the now empty bowl on top of the stack that was next to her. That was some good ramen, Tucci. You never cease in your top quality food. The cook chuckled from the kitchen, where he was busy preparing another serving of ramen for another customer. Your praise is always welcome, Kushina. There is never enough praise for the food of the gods, Databane, Kushina exclaimed with a fist raised in the air. Kushina, by the amount of times that you say that, I think that whole world knows by now. A voice said from behind Kushina with amusement in their tone. Kushina's face colored slightly before she turned around and leaped at the figure, engulfing them in a hug. Mikoto-chan, Kushina yelled as she hugged her friend with said friend hugging back. With a brown blouse, a dark purple skirt, and blue shinobi sandals, you could almost miss her on the street if it was for the sandals that signified her as a ninja. But for Naruto, it was her hair and eyes that told him that she was anything but common. Long, dark hair and eyes, the trademark signals of a Uchiha clansman, and in the village that said clan resided in, it was unlikely that she was merely a kunoichi with similar traits to the Sharingan users. This put Naruto slightly on edge. A Sharingan, while not able to pick out genjutsu as easily like a Byakugan could, would be able to see that there was a genjutsu affecting Naruto's eyes and hair. It would merely take a Sharingan user a bit more focused to identify said illusion. That is Mikoto Uchiha, one of Kushina-chan's friends. Minato pointed out from beside him as they both spun around on their stools to face the hugging duo. She was one of the first people to befriend Kushina after she arrived here. Mikoto-chan, what are you doing here? I thought you were hanging around the Uchiha compound with Fugaku team, bastard, Kushina asked, saying the entire thing with a smile on her face. Mikoto gave a small snort. Kushina, I wish you wouldn't call my husband that. Despite what you feel, I do love Fugaku, Mikoto said to her friend while Kushina pouted and folded her arms. But he stole my Mikoto time, she whined. How am I meant to like someone like that, especially when you never have any time for me? Mikoto merely raised an eyebrow at her friend's childish behavior. I do spend time with you. You're usually too busy being lip-locked with Minato to ka. A hand from Kushina, covering Mikoto's mouth, prevented her from continuing, while the Uzumaki blushed at her friend's words. Removing her hand from her friend's mouth, Kushina then turned her head around to meet Naruto's amused eyes before turning back to whisper in her friend's ear. Mikoto's eyes snapped to Naruto as Kushina whispered before a devious smile appeared on her face. She then moved away from Kushina and towards Naruto, taking the seat beside him. Oh Naruto-san, do I have stories to tell you about how that sexual deviant over there has been corrupting your son, turning him from a sweet innocent boy into a horrible man. Mikoto began to wail in faux sadness, leaning over to rest her head on Naruto's shoulder as she cried. I tried to save him, she said as she looked up, her eyes brimming with tears, but the evil that is Kushina Uzumaki was too strong. Mikoto then leaned back on his shoulder, crying again. Mikoto, Kushina exclaimed, causing both Naruto and Mikoto to look over at the Uzumaki, who was blushing a bright red. Naruto then turned his head to look at his son and chuckled at the flush of red that adorned his cheeks. What are you doing? Kushina squeaked as her face matched her hair. Mikoto merely chuckled, any sign of tears vanishing as she stood up from the stool. That's for pranking Fugaku last month. I had to listen to him rant and rave about you for 20 minutes. Walking back over to Kushina, Mikoto folded her arms in front of her friend. Let that be a reminder to you, I can get you into a lot of trouble if I choose. Stupid acting and stupid infiltration expert. Kushina grumbled as her face returned to its normal color. So Naruto-san, Mikoto said, turning back to Naruto, have you had a tour of Konoha yet? No, and it's just Naruto Mikoto-san, Naruto told the black-haired woman. Minato-kun and his girlfriend were both about to give me tour after we finished our lunch. Would you mind if I intrude Naruto? And call me Mikoto, Mikoto-san is for casual acquaintances. The Uchiha told the green-eyed man. You may follow us if you wish, Mikoto, Naruto said to the Uchiha. As the group then began to move through the streets of Konoha, pointing out various notable places in the village hidden in the leaves, they began to attract the attention of populace of the village. Civilian and shinobi pointed and whispered as their recently appointed Hokage walked through the streets with two of his kunoichi and another male. Many had seen their leader with the red-headed Uzumaki before, and occasionally with the Uchiha. Both were quite well known, but the appearance of an unknown male sent the gossips into overdrive. Whispers spread through the crowd, who all stopped and stared as they went past, about how the man was a representative from another village that wished to join into an alliance with Konoha after their performance in recently ended war. But this was quickly overridden by the rumor about how he was an Iwa spy who was sent by the Tsuchikage to assassinate their Hokage. This theory was then quickly put away by many believe that their Hokage had traveled to the future using his sealing power and managed to bring back one of the future Hokage so that they could be warned of all future conflicts. Naruto heard all this and more as he walked beside his son and his girlfriend and her friend, snorting inwardly as the sheer absurdity of some of the rumors. Did these people really have nothing better to do besides spread such ridiculous theories? Paying attention even as these thoughts ran through his head, Naruto looked over as his son pointed to a building near the base of the Hokage monument. That's the Shinobi Academy, or Academy for short. Based beside that, as I'm sure you've already realized, is the Hokage's office. Above that is the Hokage monument, a mountain with the faces of the Hokage, past and present, carved into its surface. Minato explained as they walked down a street towards said building. They had left the crowded marketplace behind them, as they had moved about, losing the villagers in the twisted maze of streets that Konoha seemed to have in large supply. Naruto didn't remember that many streets when he was last here. It looks incredibly impressive, Minato, Naruto said to his son as he stopped, prompting the rest of the group to do the same. I'm incredibly proud of what you have achieved, even if I have not been able to witness it firsthand. It was true, despite not having a father or mother, despite having no support from anyone but himself, Minato had come from nothing and made something of himself. Not necessarily something that Naruto would have liked, but he had no right to say so. He hadn't been there for Minato when he was most needed, so he had no right to criticize his son's choices. They were his to make. But even so, Naruto was still proud. Minato had created a life for himself from nothing. He had grown strong without help, and for that, Naruto was proud. A smile made its way to Minato's face under his father's praise. Thank you, Tucson. That means a lot coming from you. Minato then turned to look at the Hokage monument before turning back to Naruto. This is all there is to see on the civilian side of Konoha, unless you would like to visit some of the training grounds. Minato asked the question with complete calm in his voice, but Naruto caught the hidden meaning behind the question and what certain answers would mean. He wants to know if I'll take an interest in his profession as ninja but doesn't want to be obvious, Naruto mused. If I'll pay attention when he tells me what techniques he learnt, watch him perform new ones, and offer him an ear to use to rebound ideas off, or if I'll let my mind wander when he talks. Naruto then internally raised an eyebrow as something else hit him. He doesn't really think that I wouldn't see through that, does he? He must really be unaware of where he gets his intelligence from. I think it's time I remind him. Looking towards his son, Naruto let a smile come to his features. Minato, if you wanted to know if I would express interest in your shinobi training and abilities, you could have just asked. His smile grew a bit bigger, and a small laugh escaped from his throat as Minato's eyes widened slightly at being caught out. You got Minami's appearance, Minato. What does that leave for you to inherit from me? Now I believe we have some training grounds to visit. With that, Naruto continued to walk forward, leaving Minato and his friends who he was certain had heard, but most likely wouldn't have understood, time to put together the pieces of what happened. Behind him, Minato blinked at the place that his father was standing at moments before. He had underestimated the man, that much was as plain as day, treating him as if he was a civilian instead of like another ninja. Minato shook his head as he tried to remove himself from the stupor he was in. "What was that about?" questioned Kushina as she came up behind him. She had taken to Mikoto while he had pointed out landmarks of the village to his father, leaving the father and son time to bond. Why was he laughing? Turning to look at the one he loved dearly, Minato felt a smile make its way to his face. "It's nothing, simply Tucson showing me that I'm more like him than I realize. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you want the next part of this video, like, subscribe and comment down below and turn on the bell notification, and also check out other videos that I have created and enjoy. Stay tuned for more exciting What If stories and other amazing videos coming your way. Until next time, take care, stay curious.